There is something your cat will do one day that you will only recognize in hindsight, not because you weren't paying attention, not because you didn't care, but because it will look, in the moment, exactly like everything else it has always done. A quieter afternoon, a longer sleep, a stillness that seems peaceful rather than profound. And only later, days or weeks later, when you are sitting in the particular silence of a home that used to have a cat in it, will you replay those final days and begin to see what you couldn't see then. The goodbye your cat gave you, quiet, complete, and written in a language most owners never learn to read. This is one of the hardest stories in the entire world of cat behavior, and I almost didn't tell it, but I think it is also one of the most important, because what cats do in their final days and weeks, the specific, deliberate, deeply moving things they do for the people they love at the very end, deserves to be understood, deserves to be received, deserves to be recognized for what it is while there is still time to receive it. Stay with me. This story will be difficult in places, but it will end somewhere that I believe you need to reach. And the most important thing I want to tell you, the thing that will change how you hold this entire subject, is coming before we are done. Let's begin with something that veterinarians and animal behaviorists have documented so consistently across so many cases that it has become one of the most recognized patterns in end-of-life feline behavior, and yet it is something that most cat owners, even deeply attentive ones, miss almost every time. Cats know, not in a mystical sense, not through some paranormal awareness that exists outside the reach of biology, but in a very grounded, very physiological, very real sense. Cats receive constant, detailed feedback from their own bodies that most other animals, including humans, have been evolutionarily conditioned to suppress or ignore. Their interoceptive awareness, the internal sensing of their own bodily state, is extraordinary. They feel, with a precision and an immediacy that we cannot fully imagine, what is happening inside their own physical systems. And when those systems begin to fail, when the body that has carried them through years of life begins its final conversation with them, they know, not as a concept, not as a fear or a grief or a cognitive understanding of mortality, but as a felt, present, bodily reality that changes how they move through the world in those final weeks and days. What most owners don't realize is that this knowing, this deep embodied awareness of their own closing, shapes everything about how cats behave at the end of their lives. Every choice they make about where to be, who to be near, how to spend the diminishing hours they have left. And those choices, when you understand them, are not random. They are not arbitrary. They are, in many cases, among the most intentional things a cat will ever do. Something deeper is happening in those final quiet days than an animal simply slowing down. Think about the cats you have known, or the stories you have heard from people who loved cats that are no longer here. There is a pattern that appears so consistently across such different cats and such different circumstances that it cannot be coincidence. In the final days or weeks, many cats seek a specific closeness with their person that was not always part of their daily pattern before. The cat that was always independent, the one that kept its distance, that tolerated affection in small doses and on its own strict terms, suddenly appears in rooms it didn't used to enter, settles near the person it loves in ways it hadn't before, allows contact that it previously moved away from, stays. This shift in behavior has been documented by veterinarians and palliative care specialists who work with animals across thousands of cases. It appears, too, consistently in too many different cats with too many different baseline personalities to be explained by coincidence or by owners' wishful interpretation of ordinary behavior. But here's the thing. The reason behind this shift is not what most people assume. It is not simply that the cat is seeking comfort for itself, though that may be part of it. It is something that runs in both directions. Something that researchers who study animal end-of-life behavior have begun to describe in terms that are quietly extraordinary. Cats in their final period appear to engage in what can only be described as deliberate proximity seeking with their bonded person. Not distressed proximity, not anxious or desperate closeness, but something that looks, in its quality and its calm, like intention. Like a being that has something it wants to be near before it can no longer be near anything at all. And this is where it gets interesting. Because this end-of-life closeness is not the only behavioral shift that cats show in their final weeks. There is another one, less widely discussed, and in some ways more moving, that appears in a significant number of cases documented by people who study feline behavior and end-of-life care. Cats in their final period sometimes groom their person, not playfully, not briefly or incidentally, but with the specific, careful, sustained quality of grooming that cats reserve for the beings they consider most deeply their own, The slow, deliberate tongue along the hand, the careful attention to the hairline or the back of the wrist, the same quality of grooming that bonded cats perform on each other, grooming, researchers call it, which is one of the most intimate and most socially significant behaviors in the feline behavioral repertoire. In the wild and in multi-cat households, grooming occurs between cats that share the highest level of social bond. It is an act of mutual maintenance, of saying, in the oldest tactile language, available, you are mine to care for. And when a cat performs this behavior on a human, particularly when it does so in those final weeks with a focus and a tenderness that feels different from anything before, it is doing something that sits at the very edge of what we can put into words. It is taking care of you, one last time, in the way its body has always known how to express care, with its tongue, with its attention, with the particular, unhurried quality of a being that is doing something important and knows it. What most owners don't realize when this happens is what they are being given. They tend to receive it as sweetness, a nice moment, a tender interaction. They don't always understand, in the moment, that they are being groomed goodbye. Now let's talk about something that almost every person who has lost a cat remembers afterward, and almost nobody talks about openly because it sits in the space between the observable and the felt, the space where science and experience meet but don't always speak the same language. In the days immediately before a cat dies, many owners report a specific quality of being looked at, not the ordinary gaze, not the slow blink of affection or the alert attention of a cat tracking movement. Something different, something that owners consistently describe when they try to find words for it, as the most direct, most present, most fully there that their cat's eyes ever were. A gaze with a quality of completeness to it. As if every wall that ordinarily existed between two different kinds of being, between the human world and the feline world, between the creature that uses language and the creature that never has, had temporarily come down. This is subjective experience. It is not something that can be measured in a laboratory or reproduced in a controlled study. But it appears in the accounts of cat owners across cultures, across decades, across every demographic and every type of relationship between person and cat, with enough consistency and enough similarity of description that dismissing it entirely feels like its own kind of error. Something happens in those final looks. Something that the people who receive them carry for the rest of their lives with a particular quality of weight. Not grief exactly, though grief is part of it. Something closer to the feeling of having been truly seen, of having been, for one clear and unrepeatable moment, fully known by another living being. Your cat, at the end, looked at you, really looked, with everything it had left to give. And if you were there, if you received that look, you already know what I mean. You have always known. But here is where I need to take this story somewhere important. Because so far, I have been describing things that happen when the end comes slowly. When there is time, when the final days unfold in a way that allows for presence and awareness, and the quiet accumulation of last moments. But not every goodbye happens that way. And for the owners whose cats went suddenly, who had no warning, no final weeks, no chance to sit with what was coming before it arrived, this story can feel like something it is not meant to feel like a list of things they missed, like an inventory of moments that didn't happen. So let me say this plainly before we go any further. If your cat's goodbye was sudden, if you didn't get the long, quiet ending where things could be recognized and received, that does not mean your cat didn't say goodbye. It means the goodbye was distributed differently, spread across all the ordinary days instead of concentrated into the final ones, in every slow blink across a quiet room. In every morning it appeared to find you. In every night it chose your side of the bed. In every small, unremarkable moment of closeness that you may have been too busy or too unwilling to think about endings to receive as the love letter it actually was. Your cat was saying goodbye to you across the entire length of your shared life. Every day it chose you, every day it stayed, and this brings us to the place I promised to reach. The thing that matters most in this story, the reason I thought it was worth telling at all. We spend so much of our time with our cats in the future and the past, worrying about their health, remembering their kittenhood, planning for their care. We scroll through old photos, we make vet appointments, we buy better food and better beds and better everything, in the ongoing project of being good to the animal we love. And all the while, the cat is here, present, in this room, in this moment, looking at you with those ancient, extraordinary eyes that have always seen you more completely than you've seen yourself. The goodbye your cat will give you is not something that happens at the end. It is something that has been happening all along. In every piece of closeness it has offered, every act of trust it has extended, every quiet night it has spent in The orbit of your particular warmth. The ending, when it comes, is simply the last page of a story that has been written in full, every day, in the language of presence and choice and the small, repeated, utterly sincere acts of a being that decided long ago that you were worth staying near. What I'm asking you to do, the only thing this story is really asking, is to be here for it now, not later, when the absence makes the presence impossible to ignore. Now, while the cat is still in the room, while the eyes are still open and the purr is still running and the small warm body still has the ability to find you in the dark and stay. Be here for it the way your cat has always been here for you. Completely, without distraction, without the forward-thinking anxiety that steals us from our own present moments. Just here, just this, just the two of you, in whatever ordinary evening this is, living the unrepeatable day of it, because one day, and you will not know in advance which day it is, your cat will look at you for the last time with those eyes that have always known you. And what you will want, in every moment after that, is to know that you looked back, that you were present, that you received what was being given without knowing it was the last giving. Your cat has been saying something to you every day of its life, the same thing, in 100 different forms, through every gesture and every closeness and every quiet act of staying. I am here. I chose this. I chose you. Hear it today? While it is still being said, while there is still time to say it back. If this story reached somewhere deep, share it with someone who loves a cat and needs to be reminded to be present with it today. And if you want to keep exploring the profound hidden world of your cat, we will always be right here,